Well, hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Retro Power and Cut. And we're going to start with the Churchill Jag this week, and Stu's been beavering away as always on it, backwards and forwards, getting panel fits right, and there's been an element of frustration now and again during the week, I think it would be fair to say, but we're moving forwards, and things are actually falling into place quite well now. If only it was as simple as them falling into place, that would be nice, but it's coming together pretty well. Stu's had the brass door top frames on and off a few times this week, and he's made up a window, which I haven't got to hand, but he's made up a plywood window. You've seen it before. I'm going to rest my cup on here. Not being rude to the car, but I'm just going to put that on there. Yeah, Stu's made a dummy window from plywood. He'd already made a dummy window from plywood, but it had quite substantial corner cutouts in it to allow him to braze the corners of the frame. And the problem with that was that it had a little bit too much movement in it because of those corner cutouts, which meant that it wasn't possible to accurately use that as the piece of glass to check that the runner parallelism of the runners was correct, and that the movement of the window would be free, and that it was all free from twist, because there was a slight concern over twist in the frame. So Stu's made another plywood window, if you like, another dummy window without the corner cutouts, because he's done the brazing now, doesn't need to braze the corners anymore, and then fitted that plywood window into the frame, fitted the frame into the door, fitted the motor, generally mocked up the whole door using a piece of plywood, which is obviously quite rigid to any twist, to ensure that it's free moving up and down the runners, which I believe it all is. I didn't actually see any of that because I was busy doing something else, but I believe that is all good, and everything's cheery and a happy result in terms of the window movement. So that's all gone well. Stu's then put the doors back on the car. He may have, I can't remember what order they've been on and off, but he's got the doors back on, and the heights were not quite right. The last time the doors were refitted, they were not quite right. So there's a bit further adjustment needed there. There's a couple of tweaks needed to a couple of things, and there's still a few leading tweaks to do. He's got those in place, got the brass top frames in, and checked the fit into the window surround and checked everything's good there. Then the next phase was there's a modification needed. I can't remember if I mentioned this last week or not, but there's a modification needed to the inner roof frame above the window, because where we moved the B pillar, the side of the roof on the Jaguar is in a long radius, a varying radius, a decreasing radius, but it is in one long radius. And in order to be able to use flat glass, where the B pillar originally sat, about there, Jag basically put two chords into that radius so that it was two flat sections. And obviously having moved the B pillar back meant that the point of those two was now partway down the window frame. So one of the final sort of structural areas that needed addressing was to change the roof frame in the vicinity of this front door frame to be a straight line, so that we've got a straight edge for the door seal to shut against. And to that end, Stu's made up some sections. So I will pull out from here. The side nearest camera is already done and fitted. Stu's made these two pieces. This piece is the seal channel. This section here captures the channel. Stu's made, I don't think they're over here, he's made a little tool from some angle, some 3mm by 25mm angle, which he's formed this over to get the curve, because as you can see it's curved that way, and then it has a fold which he would have shrunk on, and then a little turn section which holds the seal, and that turn section was then tapped over the former that Stu's made. So that then welds in above the door, get that right, that way around, like that. That door would be that way, so the seal sits in there and the door shuts into that. So that goes like that, and then inside of that there is a return section which sits like that onto there, spot welds to it, and then that spot welds to the inside frame of the roof. So those two pieces fit together like that, and then spot weld there, and spot weld and plug weld under there. Then this section is actually part of the original gutter panel, so then that's TIG welded all the way along there into the existing roof frame, which I was doing yesterday, upside down TIG weld, which was fun, but yeah, that's TIG welded in along there and then plug welded through those holes. So that's all come together nicely actually, and solve that one of the final sort of conundrums of getting pieces of the body to all fit together. As you can imagine, there's been a few complications along the way, and that was one of them. So those bits, the next task really, which I've been trying to get onto this morning and thwarted by mending things, which we'll come onto in a little bit, is that I need to get on with welding those in. So that's where we're at on that. I think next I'm going to pick up my COUPE and we'll move on. We're going to swing by Redux, and as you can see they're multiplying. We'll report a little, we'll skim over that one next week. But we're going to skim over this one this week. Very, very, very brief, really. This week's work's actually around this side. Scott's been doing some minor repairs on this front radiator support panel. The car had a very small bit of damage on that, so that needed repairing and making sure that it was all in the right place and that there were no dents in it and that it was all as BMW intended originally. And then the major work really going on at the moment is the footwell modifications and inner wing and A-pillar modifications this side, which enable the fitment of considerably larger wheels. So there's a significant amount of metal work undertaken in that area there to enable the larger wheels to be fitted, which is what's ongoing at the moment. Scott's just wheeling up the panel that forms the new footwell section, because that's a compound curved panel that gives greater clearance for the wheel. So that's what's going on. That will be brief on the Redux side of things. A brief skim over that, then on to V12 E-Type, where Sam is working on, no prizes for guessing, seat mounts. I think he's probably just about had enough of them now. The added complication being that the seats in an MX-5 are not symmetrical, so the runners are different on this side to the other side, so the job is slightly more complicated this side. Some of the changes he'd like to make he can't because of the design of the seat, so the fabrication is slightly complicated by that. But he's got the front mounts done. He's just welding up the rear seat mount for this side. Once he's got that in, then he can put the clearance section in the exhaust tunnel, get that welded in, and then I think that at that point the seat mountings and the transmission tunnel in the vicinity of the seat mountings is all finished. So, and I think then there'll be a bit of a pause on the metal work side of this E-Type while the CAD work continues, because there's quite a lot of CAD work required for any progress to happen at all in the bulkhead area, the HVAC area, and any of the other interior and all of the rear end modifications that need to be done for the composite rear body that's going on this. So that's pretty much where we're at on that. I shall keep it fairly brief, because it's just detail work going on to enable seats to be mounted. So there's only so much I can explain around that. So that's pretty much where we're at on that one. Moving on from there, we're going to come to the troop of Allegros, past Bobby, who's busy away on this at the moment. In fact, we'll start at the back here, because that's the first bit I'm walking past. Bobby's currently working on the rear. Earlier this morning, he cut out the parcel. Was that earlier this morning or yesterday? Lose track. He's removed the parcel shelf anyway. The standard Austin parcel shelf has gone. That gives him access to get in to be able to remove some extraneous metalwork from the bottom of the C-pillars, because we've changed the structure in that area, and then he's fabricating the folded sort of top hat sections that extend the original C-pillar reinforcer down so that it meets the top of the Allegro inner wheel arch. So in here, where this blue magnet is in here, Bobby's got a top hat section fitted in that area there, which extends the C-pillar down onto the inner wheel arch and just ties all the structure together so that this isn't just floating in space. So that goes in as another reinforcer section in, and then a closing panel that goes over there, which you'll have seen on the previous car. But that all ties the inner wheel arch structure into the Austin shell in a really strong fashion. and just makes it all it's just all integrated as one piece. So that's the stuff going on at the back, and then the major part of his progress has been the front, where again, it's a repeat of fairly recent work, so you'll have seen it all on the first car. However, there's a repeat. In fact, we've got quite a nice juxtaposition of the two here. There's car, this car too. This is the section which, and its friend, the opposite side of the car, that Bobby's been working on. He's got we talked about these ovalised tubes that have the holes in, currently for self-tapping screws, but they will then have the threaded inserts, the riv nuts in, which will hold the carbon fibre front wings on once they're done. At the moment it just holds the steel standard wings on, which we've had to cut bits of out to clear things, but the final wings will screw onto that. And then this hollow section adds all the strength back that we removed from the Integra inner wing, and actually adds quite a lot more strength to that area, just because we wanted to really beef that area up as much as we could within the confines of the Allegro wing top, because the top part of the wing is entirely standard in shape to the original Allegro wing. And this box section here with these reinforcing ribs ties all that in, gives the cantilever, it allows the cantilever to spread its load into the pillar, and then up in here, and my finger's poking around there, that's the drain hole from the scuttle drain. So the water that goes in there runs across inside the scuttle, out through the drain that you've seen in previous weeks, through the inner and outer layers of the A pillar. There's a little channel, a little tube, effectively an ovalised tube, comes through the two inner wing sections out into the inside of this reinforcer, and then drops the water out of the bottom corner of the reinforcer. Outer wing comes down here, and it'll run down and run off down here and out of the way. So that's all now in place, finished, done. I think we mentioned this before, this flange around here that carries the seal, which will seal against the outer carbon fibre wing once that's done. So yeah, Bobby's moved on to the back, and then that car's, other than the dash fabrication work, going to be pretty much at the same point that that one's at. This one can then come off the jig. We'll probably move the jig out of here for a little while then, just to give us a little bit more space, and then we'll carry on with the two cars in parallel, getting all of the final fabrication work buttoned up. There's quite a lot to do because we've got to do a full dry build. You know, it's not just the actual physical structural welding work. There's lots of detail work, interior detail work that needs doing to make sure we've got all of the provisions and brackets and everything else in place to mount everything that needs to be mounted. We've got to get the fuel tank in, we've got to do loads of bits and bobs, and we also need to put them in turn on the lift so that we can get the fuel system all assembled under the car, get the fuel lines drawn up and made up, and all of the bits that go under the car that need to be on the lift. And then once all that's done, they'll need to come off the lift and go on a rotisserie to have all the weld finishing done underneath. Then once that's done, they'll need to await the carbon fibre rear quarter panels, because we'll need those to then be able to fabricate the rear inner arch extension pieces that will come out to tie into the inside of the carbon quarters. And the other bit I've skipped over actually at the back of here is, once Bobby's got those C-pillars tied into the wheel arches, he can cut these quarter panels off. Once he's got these quarter panels off, he's got to finish the rear of the sill and also make the seatbelt mountings that go into the inner quarter panel and onto the top of the sill. And the seatbelt mountings need to be made to replicate the other car as well. So yeah, all good stuff, really good progress. Everything's moving forward nicely on that. And that pretty much ties up where we are in here. In the body shop, we're tying up loose ends, lots of little loose ends. We're pretty much in need of Project Churchill into the body shop now. That's pretty much where we're at. We're just, there's various bits of finishing off being done, some paint samples that we needed to do, some test samples that we were doing for some paint protection products. A bit of motorbike work for Scott, our fabricator's father. We're doing a bit of work for him, and various other things going on. Some bits of Stu's Range Rover as well, actually, in there. So we're at a position now where we really do need the Project Churchill into the body shop, but we can't rush this section. Everything's got to be done right, so that's where we're at with that. Moving on from there, I'm going to quickly touch on some workshop-y related things, because I know some people like it, some people probably don't, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to walk this way, and I'm going to make Jamie stay on his toes because I'm going to show him something else first. we have done a couple of little bits of maintenance work. We're going to go into the not very often seen machine room. We don't come in here very often, so it's not really seen on camera a lot. But this is our little machine shop, and this is our trusty 1930 something, can't remember exactly what year, bandsaw, which since we've owned it has really needed a bit of TLC. It's had various TLC, but one thing it's needed is the blade guide sorting out and a better clearance brass piece in the bottom of the table. So earlier on in the week, or was it maybe end of last week, made up a new brass centre for the table. So that's got nice, more or less zero, close to zero clearance on the blade, and a nice regrind of these very hard. I don't actually know what they're made of. I think it is just a tool steel, but these tool steels, they're sliding inserts, not rollers. Some bandsaws have rollers to guide the blade. These are on slides on these speed axe machines, but they had quite a lot of play in and now have absolutely no play whatsoever in them. Really, really accurate now. So I'm almost disproportionately pleased with this, because it's like a brand new bandsaw now, and I really like this machine. It's one of my favourite old bits of kit around the workshop, so it's almost like a pet to me, this one. So I'm very happy to have got that all really nice and working well, and then make Jamie's life really difficult reversing out of there, because we'll go and look at some carnage in another area of the workshop we don't see very often, which is the plasma room, where Rich is busy, or has been busy. Whew, and it's a bit full of aerosol, and there's a big vacuum cleaner in here and all sorts of carnage going on. This is where our 3D printer lives, that you'll have seen before, just because it's out of the way and out of the workshop and out of everybody's hair in here. This is our CNC plasma cutter. As you can see, there's bits of it missing at the moment. I've been doing various things with this. One is getting our torch height controller working. The machine has, it's called a Razor Dance digital torch height controller on it, which has never worked since we've had the machine. The chap I got the machine from wasn't even really aware that it had it, slightly strangely. And I now have the torch height controller working. What I'm trying to get my head around now is we use Sheet Cam as our cam software, and I'm now just trying to get my head around being able to set the torch height controller voltage within Sheet Cam in the G-code. And I'm not really an expert on putting G-code add-ons into Sheet Cam and writing post-processor script for Sheet Cam. So got that going on in the background. But more importantly, Rich has dragged, this is the water table, the water trough for the plasma cutter. That would be in the middle of there. It has a set of slats in here, and the metal goes on top of that you're going to cut, and it cuts it, and that catches all the water in there, catches all the fumes and all the sparks and everything else. The problem we've had since we've had the machine is it's not really deep enough. By the time you've got the water as high as you need it to be able to just be touching the piece you're cutting, it's almost overflowing. And it means the whole machine is permanently swimming in water, rusting away. So another little background task we've got going on is Rich has dragged this table off. We're going to get this round into the workshop, clean up the top, and we're going to weld on a 50mm extension strip all the way around this water trough, just so that we can run the water at the height we want to run it at without it overflowing and making a terrible mess everywhere. So another little background job going on. There's an awful lot of this sort of stuff. When you get a business to the size that ours is now, there's almost continuous stream of repair work and upgrade work and maintenance work and that sort of thing going on constantly. And this is just one example of that. You know, you can sit still and leave things to get into a poor state and not look after them, and then that's when you'll have problems. So you just have to get onto these things and get them sorted while you can, so that everything's working to the best of its ability all of the time, really. You know, even with that aim, there's still things broken. Like this morning, I was mending one of our electric DA sanders because the power supply had packed in. So, you know, it's just all sorts of constant mending going on when you've got 20 odd people working non-stop and all sorts of things breaking down. So yeah, I think that pretty much captures where we're at in terms of fabrication shop and the body shop, and a little bit of an insight into background stuff going on. And at that point, I will hand over to Cal.
Release.
This is Buzz, new retro power dog.
Look at the camera, you fool. That's the money shot.
Oh dear.
Come on, chill out. Good boy. What are you chewing on? Ah.
What was it?
I don't actually know. What have you got?
Thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to start in the office because Dean, our upholsterer, has just dropped off the seats for the Project One Escort. I can't remember whether we showed the swatches that we had for this before. We've probably showed some hints of how the interior is going to look, but it's nice to sort of have the first full-sized suggestion. So this is a Mercedes anthracite leather on the bolsters with a Harris tweed houndstooth cloth, which is kind of a dark blue, a light blue and a grey. And then there's going to be a continuation of this in the car, and that's something we've been working on a bit this week. Is I was finalising the door cards so that Dean could take them with once he drops off the seats. So we previously showed the plastic cards back from being laser cut, and we'd made some little metal infill strips that were mild steel, so we could stud weld metal studs onto the back of them, so they'll be held on with nuts from the back of the card. But what I wanted to do was get those cards fully fitted in the car and set where the stitch lines are going to be, because there's going to be a grey stitch to match the stitches on the side of these bolsters that runs all the way down the front card, all the way down the back card. Wanted to make sure those are going to be aligned. So I got the cards in the car, set up a laser level, casting a laser line around the whole interior so I could mark out that line. And just generally do a trial fit to make sure the cards fitted as good as we hoped, which they did. So Dean's taken those now, and we'll basically have the houndstooth cloth around those metal inserts I was talking about, forming a little strip down the door card, the grey stitch near the top and the rest in black leather. If you follow me, we'll have a look at some other bits that have been going on. Whoa, we'll have to go this way. Right, so Project One, carrying on talking about that. So we had an absolute ton of parts back from anodising. I think we showed a lot of the machine parts ready to go last week. They came back early this week. So things like the front speaker grills, the rear speaker grills, the air vents for in the dash, the surround around the air conditioning control panel, the tanks, so the reservoirs that sit at the back of the engine bay. There's a brake/clutch fluid one for the screen wash fill, the dry sump tank, and probably all sorts of parts I've forgotten about, but basically stacks of parts back from anodising, pedal arms and pedal pads as well, which has opened up loads of jobs on that now. We can get the pedal box assembled, we can get all the tanks fitted in the engine bay. Anthony's been carrying on with the fuel plumbing. We had it up on the lift earlier. We're sort of juggling different avenues on it because Alex wants to finalise the exact shaping of the loom before he readjusts his patterns upstairs for the second one for Project Kuma. He wants to get the exact curvature of everything set so he can then lay it out on the table with the curvature on it and readjust his patterns for that. So he wanted to get that in there, which means we need that on the ground. So prior to that, Anthony was getting all the fuel lines cut to size and ready to be crimped. And then we brought that down for the minute, and they basically moved their focus over onto this one for a while whilst Alex buttons up the wiring loom. But once that wiring loom's done, we can then get everything in for the final time. Now we've got all those anodised parts back. And then obviously I've just talked about the fact the door cards have gone to be upholstered, so it's quite exciting that we're at that stage where a lot can go together reasonably quickly on that now. Alex has also been working on the sort of, I'd often call them sub-looms, or the bits of the wiring that aren't actually part of the main harness. They're things that it connects to. So for instance, the switches for the centre console, he's been putting trailing wires onto those and potting the contacts, which is basically putting a little dam around where the contacts are and filling it with a potting material, which is, I think in this case he was using a heat softened glue. It's sometimes epoxy that you mix as two parts and pour it in. But it basically means that the wires can't pull off their terminals, and it protects them against kind of abrasion and repeated movement. And then another thing actually that I've been able to do on that, because the engine and gearbox went in last week, was finalise the centre console. So there were a few jobs that were hinging on me being able to sit in it with the centre console and a gear stick in it. The centre console design was essentially there, but I wanted to check that the movement of the gear stick didn't go far enough to touch the billet bezel that we'd designed that goes on the centre console, which it doesn't. So I was able to finalise the drawing for the centre console gear shifter surround, the phone tray that sits in front of it, and the bezel for the volume control that sits on the back of it. So they've all now been sent off to be machined, and the actual console part itself can be finalised and upholstered now. So that was one thing, and then I also needed to sit in it to check the mirror angles. So we're designing and making our own mirrors for it, which are kind of a nod to the old Bullet design, but I've got some of those Tex Bullet mirrors on my Celica, and they're atrocious in terms of the available angle adjustment on them. And they look a bit clunky the way the front part kind of sits on the main body. So we're doing kind of our own interpretation that's a machined bullet shape, but has a glass actually inside that can be adjusted to some extent. But because there'll only be a fairly small amount of adjustment, I want to get the actual angle of the mirror body itself sort of chamfered extremely close to the position it will be. Now, when we did the trial fitting way back in the sort of early stages of metalwork, I noted down the eye position of the owner versus the roof and front to back. So basically I know where his eyes are in the car when he's sat in his favoured position. And kind of recreating that position and holding mirrors up, we've basically worked out the angle both inward and upward that they need to be, so we could actually set the chamfers on our mirror design to be like that. So hopefully the glass will be almost completely parallel with the actual shape of the mirror body, but we do have some adjustment available in there. So with that done, that means we've also finalised the models for the mirrors, so they can be sent to be machined. And then another thing which was waiting me sat in it was the instrument binnacle. Again, that's going to be a machined part, and I wanted to check the angle that the gauges are sat in that binnacle to make sure they were basically pointing directly at the owner's eyes when he was sat in there. So again, using that positional data that we got during the trial fitting, I've just adjusted the angle until it was completely pointing at my face, and then we've tweaked the model accordingly, and that is yet another model that's now signed off, ready to be machined, and that most of those parts form the final batch of machined parts for this car. So instrument binnacle, the mirror components, and the components that go in the centre console. So yes, quite a lot going on with that project at the minute, and about to be a lot going on with its sister car. Now that's sort of down, waiting for a bit of wiring work with it on the floor, we've moved over to doing a lot of the mechanical assembly work on this, which we'd already prepared for. So subframe was ready to go in, that's now in, the front cross member's already in, so very shortly now we'll be able to get struts on this, get this rolling, and then we can basically start going through the sequence of events to get it to the same stage that Project 1 is at. And glancing back over there, it's just reminded me there was another job on this which also involves some of the anodised parts, which is the wiper assembly. So maybe if we perhaps just come around here a sec. Jamie, do you want to just maybe stand over there and face back towards me this way? We always struggle with like the glare off these lights, and I always forget that it's better if we shoot it this way. So wiper spindles. We've been looking at the wiper assemblies on these, and they have the sort of big parallel splined bosses that I think they were to suit kind of Tex wiper arms. They were a fairly standard thing on cars of this era, but they're pretty rubbish, and the wiper arms you can get don't really have enough spring pressure. They float off the windscreen at high speed, they slip on the splines very easily. They're just not a very nice solution. And then sort of by Mark II era, they'd switched to these kind of tapered spline with a thread and a nut that actually holds the wiper arm on it. It was a much nicer solution, and actually you can up the rating of the springs in those wiper arms, and they're pretty pleasing at that point. So we wanted to create a sort of hybrid wiper mechanism. You can almost, the spacing is the same as a Mark II, so you can kind of fit a Mark II mechanism in there, but the bracketry is different. And on ours, we've got the Motec ECU over there, we've got some of the plumbing for the screen wash, and everything was going to be sitting very tight. So we decided to build our own hybrid wiper mech. And actually, there was another reason, is that the threads on the wiper mechanisms that we had, the threads that hold them here with these nuts, were not much cop either. They were a bit sort of worn out from over the years. So we designed and machined our own spindles, both the inner and the outer. So the outer's an aluminium machined part. The spacer tubes that go in here we've machined from aluminium, or Andy Concept 303 has to our drawing. And then the actual inner spindle, we've machined those in-house from stainless steel. And essentially done all that to mount into the original mounting piece with the original cranks welded on. so that it's the original motor, well, the original motor mount, the original bracketry, the original sort of mounting housing. We'd already upgraded the motor to a more modern motor, and now we've kind of got stainless steel spindles, nice newly machined aluminium housings. It's just sort of nice from an engineering point of view. We got to the point with this car where everything is so nicely engineered and brand new that it seemed a shame to have an old Mark 1 Escort wiper mechanism with some kind of bad fitting wiper arms on it. So that's looking really good, and then we can basically use the more modern type wiper arms that go onto the spline fitting with a nut, much like you get on a Mark 2 Escort. Now what we'll use is kind of an upgraded version of that have the hooked end rather than the pin end onto the actual wiper arm. Yeah, another big step forward to achieving hopefully very minimal things that we can grumble about on it. So that's that. Obviously I've passed by Project Kuma, the other Escort, in terms of getting the mechanicals in it. I probably should have mentioned the fact that last time we saw it, it was still in the paint shop. So the guys last week were flatting and polishing all the paint, and this came round here, I think yesterday or the day before. So that's that. Land Cruiser, we're just nipping a few last ends up on that. I've been writing the owner's manual for it, which I actually meant to show the Morris owner's manual in last week's episode and forgot, so maybe we'll just stick some footage of that in now. We wanted to do some restraints for the seat belts. Now originally on these there was it was like a fixed 3-point belt, but you could actually unclip the diagonal off the waistband, and there was a hole on it that could then be hooked over a bolt on the body shell. Now the new belts we've got in that don't have that facility, but we still thought it'd be nice to be able to clip the plug up on the side rather than it just kind of falling down on the floor, because they're not inertia reels. So James has come up with the idea of doing a magnetic one. So we're going to put some magnets threaded into the B-pillars, which the seatbelt buckles basically will magnet onto, so you can just undo it, stick it to the magnet, and it stops it dropping out the door shut when you get out of the car. So yeah, owner's manual, magnets for the seat belts, and I think there was one other thing they were just nipping in the bud, was we had a leak on the fuel tank vent pipe, so we've just put some new olives on that. But that is very much looking good to go. And speaking of good to go, well, in a slightly different sense, the Camaro, which we showed firing up last week, we also managed to get to the stage of it being drivable. The guys were saying, because the owner said, oh, is there any chance he can get it so I could maybe see it running on the 1st of November? And this was probably 2 weeks prior to that. And they really pulled it out the stops, the guys did, and got it running within a week and a bit, maybe 8 days. And James said to me, actually, you know what, I reckon we could probably get it driving as well. Like at least just fore and aft steering working, clutch working, brakes working. So they carried on, and yeah, sure enough, with 3 days to spare, I think they managed to get it to the point that it could be driven. So James moved it around here a bit. It's been moved in and out of the workshop a few times now under its own steam, and it's actually, as a straight off the bat go, been really good. Don't think there's been any fluid leak. I think we had one union on the power steering which leaked a little bit, but that was just because somebody had neglected to tighten it. Other than that, brakes feel good, clutch feels good, power steering feels good. It sounds absolutely incredible. So when the owner came over, he had his wife and son with him, who I think is 2 years old, and it's safe to say that the exhaust note on it definitely terrifies a 2-year-old. But it certainly impressed me. I think it was the first time I'd actually heard it properly in person, other than just panicking about it running okay and everything being all right. It was the first time I got to kind of enjoy the sound of it and give it a blip of the throttle. And God, it sounds absolutely savage. So yeah, that's kind of awesome to see as well. And I think actually on that note, I feel like there was something else I was going to talk about. Yes, there was some more CAD stuff done. So it's all Escort based this week. I'm going to go back over here, even though I'm not really pointing at anything in particular. But Project 1, Luke has been working on modelling, doing the final modelling work on some parts. So I was talking about finalising various machine bits. The rear lamps were one that we've kind of been working on. They were slightly on the back burner, and we just wanted to push them over the finishing line in terms of the modelling work. So this really goes back to the fact that, similar to the wiper mechanism, it seemed a bit off to be using scabby original back castings for the rear lamps because they're not available as a new part. And then the bulb holders that go into them are just not very nice. They're kind of like, they attach in with some kind of metal claws, and they're all obviously, what, 40, probably more, 50 years old now, 60 years old. So the contacts tend to be a bit corroded. They're just not particularly nice. So we wanted to use some newly available bulb holders, and we wanted them to have a proper connector because they're just spade terminals originally. So we found some, I think they were probably Jaguar Land Rover range bulb holders that are kind of a plastic push and turn fitment with a sealed connector that can go into them. And then we've designed our own back shells for those rear lamps that take those push and turn plastic bulb holders. And then we've also designed our own bezels because we want to anodise those with the bronze accent colour that's going to be elsewhere on the car. So we've designed the bezels to go with them as well, so it'll all be new parts at that point because the lenses were already getting new from MST and the seals were getting new from MST, so the remaining bits were basically the bezels, which you can get new chromed, but obviously because of the surface finish we wanted to do on them, we were doing our own. And the back shells, which we've now produced new as well. So yes, that is all going pretty well. There'll be something else I've forgotten, but I think I've probably waffled on about Escort machine parts enough now anyway, so we'll see you next week. Don't forget, in the shop, Christmas is coming, so there are t-shirts, there's hoodies, there's beanies, there's mugs, and we have coffee back in stock. So we sold out of the whole bean coffee retro power blend. That is back in stock now, and it's well worth trying, I have to say, because I ran out. I've been having some at home. I ran out of it and just went down the co-op as an emergency job and bought whatever beans came to hand. And I must say, after having had that stuff for so long, I don't know, it's a matter of taste, but I could not wait to get some more back in stock because by comparison, whatever I got from the co-op was terrible. And it wasn't the co-op own brand before the co-op people start criticising me.
Driver, start your engine!